What's up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm talking to Spencer Gordon Sand, who just got back from Las Vegas, where he dominated a historic Magic the Gathering Rochester Draft Cube event that I hosted. He won $18,000, and in the process, he beat some incredible players, including a two-time Pro Tour winner, also a Pro Tour world champion in Nathan Steuer. He is an emergent figure in the global TCG space. He's a great Magic player, a brilliant and fascinating guy. We're going to have a ton of things to talk about, and I can't wait to get started. Spencer Gordon Sand. So nice to see you, man.
So good to see you. And Brian, thank you so much for having me. Excited to chat and have this conversation.
First off, I need to talk about your gaming background. You introduced yourself as a game designer. Whenever I meet a game designer, they always have an extensive gaming background. When did you start playing video games, or games in general, actually, board games, etc.?
Well, so I've been playing chess. Chess was probably the first game that I played. And I played that from kindergarten until about sixth grade. And I quit it to pursue fencing, which I will kind of argue in many ways is a game, but that's maybe a separate conversation. It's not quite the type of game we're talking about. For me, Magic the Gathering was the game that I really played a lot of in addition to chess, and I think shaped a lot of my view of the genre. I've also played a lot of Hearthstone. I played a bit of Soulforge back in the day, but kind of Magic is the game that kept drawing me back into this genre. And within Magic, I'm mostly a legacy and vintage and cube player. So those are the three things I play. I used to play a fair amount of standard. I am not in the life position to keep up with what standard is or even kind of know what's going on in it now. And
totally. It's
increasingly feeling like that is kind of trickling down to vintage even and legacy, where even legacy is very different every time I come back to it. But the good news is my cube doesn't change unless I want it to change. So that's sort of my protest. And now I've been playing a fair amount of pre-modern as well.
Before we talk about Magic and your segue into Magic and what really captivated you so much about the game, I wanted to touch on a thing I've been asking all of my guests, which is, it's a little hard to come up with it on the spot, but I'd like for you to think about the top 5 favorite games that you've played in your life. And they can be board game, digital. I don't know if I would count fencing among them because it's more of an athletic sport, but your top 5 favorite games.
Okay, this is a good one. I think Magic. Well, so I'm going to put aside my own game, right? Because I think that's an unfair answer to this question. But
yeah, that's reasonable.
I would probably put Magic at number 1. I would also put Overwatch very highly on this list, although I am not good at Overwatch. I think it is a very beautifully designed genre of game. And then I would probably also put. I really like Mario Kart. I think that game is fantastically designed. It Takes Two is really, really good. Really, really good.
Tell me about that one.
It Takes Two is a 2-player co-op game. And then I forget what the second one, there's a second one that was released, but you must play with 2 players. And the first one is a husband and wife that are going through a divorce, and you play as the husband and wife. And it's a lot of platforming and all sorts of, and shooting and all sorts of stuff. And every chapter is a different thing. It's just a beautifully designed game with a very interesting and weird story arc. The first one is incredibly traumatic.
Divorce, the game, right? That sounds bizarre.
And you're in your child's bedroom for parts because you get shrunk to a tiny size, and you're trying to get back to normal size. And it's a very odd game. The second one is you are 2 very antagonistic writers who are trapped in this alternate reality that is their books.
Really?
And you can tell they had a much larger budget. The second one I think is better, but it was just as someone who plays a lot of games, it is very uncommon that I find a game that really feels net new in terms of concepting. And there's this other game which I really like. I think I'm at 5 now, which is Boomerang Foo is a game that I really, really like. It is a very silly Switch game, which is basically, it's kind of like first person Fruit Ninja, where you are the fruit and you're trying to chop each other in half. And it's a very, very simplistic game that I have a lot of hours in. And one of the reasons I like it is so simplistic that it is very easy to teach other people to play. But it also has an incredibly high skill cap. But there's something about the pacing of it that I think is really good. I very much enjoy.
Interesting. And you said it was a Switch game?
Switch game, yeah.
Yeah, so did they make it in VR?
No. This is. I don't even think this is a very popular Switch game.
Interesting.
It's an indie Switch game.
Yeah, when I think of a sort of Fruit Ninja, my child played Fruit Ninja when he was 3 or something, and we played a bunch of Beat Saber and stuff. And it seems like that kind of style of slashing things lends itself really, really well to VR experience.
Yeah,
it's kind of the best way to use a VR, the way that the controllers kind of feel and work.
Yeah.
They're much better at forming like lightsabers than they are a bow and arrow or a gun or something. Just feel more like that.
Well, something that I think is very interesting to me is an increasing feeling that I've been having is like so much of everything in everybody's life is digital right now that I actually think like many like physical games are like have a huge advantage in adoption, because I find myself whenever I'm sitting down to like play physical chess, like very happy that I'm like the tactile experience and I'm not looking at a screen. And I think like one of the things that, at least for me, is like so much of my work is on the computer that like increasingly like when I'm enjoying my free time and wanting to be playing games, I want to be doing it not while looking at a screen. I actually think that that's like probably a trend that will continue and be more pervasive.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I can relate to that. It's definitely going to be the subject of something we talk about in a few minutes, certainly when we discuss your TCG. Mm-hmm. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask you about transitioning to Magic. When you picked up the game, what your initial impression was, and whether you had that same obvious prodigious ability that you demonstrated at chess right away in Magic. Was there a steep learning curve? Did you wander around playing as a casual for years? How did it go?
I definitely played it as a casual for a little bit. I remember playing like elves during Cobblade, and that was not the right choice.
What year was that?
This is like World Wake just came out, so 2012 maybe?
2012. Yeah, it's so interesting to think
don't know the dates, but yeah.
The game has been around for so long that it's been played by 3 different generations. I was a kid. I was 19 when I started to play the game.
Yeah.
And I'm Gen X. I'm going to be 52 this year. It's just strange, and that your introduction came 14 years ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
When you were, considerably younger and almost about the same age as me, actually, when I started playing, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say like I was pretty good at Magic. Like I think I'm like was always like fairly above average, especially there's a couple of things that I was quite good at, which is like memorizing deck lists and like, so I always knew what my opponents were playing. And I think something, and also understanding how to train to get better at Magic. I think I was better than a lot of other people at, which is like a practice that I had and have for a very long time is twofold, which is like when you move cities or whatever, I like my vision is you go find the best players locally and play with them, not in tournaments, and like play with your hands face up and debate what the correct moves are. This is like if you want to get much, much better at Magic, like find the best person in your city and play Magic with them where both of your hands are face up. And don't play as though you know each other's hands. Be like, should I have known that, or should I have played around that? Should I not have played? And like, I think you'll get much better. I also would always, when we were doing that, borrow other people's decks. Cause I think you also like is in Magic, if you are playing in order to play against a deck, you are much better at playing against decks that you have played. Right. And so like, I think a lot of people in Magic get really stuck in a rut of like, I only play this one deck, especially because maybe they only have the cards or whatever. But if you want to get really, really good, you need to understand, like for example, like a lot of players in Legacy don't really understand how Storm works because they don't want to play that genre of deck, right? They're just not Storm players. But like, even if you don't want to play Storm, like you should go Storm combo a bunch of times so that you understand, all right, hey, like I need to counter actually the like Cabal ritual instead of countering like the ad nauseum is like an incredibly important difference to will you win this game or not. And like Magic is a game where you are greatly rewarded for having conceptual knowledge of your opponent's deck list. It's also a game where you're greatly rewarded for metagaming and also understanding like your own metagame of your own play style. Like I know that like thinky mid-range decks do really good for me. Like I'm good at this kind of thing. I am not quite as good at like just stormy combo decks. And I'm not quite as good at just like pure aggro decks. But I actually, when I got into Magic, was a lot more into the buying and selling and trading side of it than just the playing. And so like I would mostly go to Magic tournaments to like trade. And like, this is before everyone had their phones and there's prices and stuff.
Right. Of course, just like you can actually haggle for real, right?
Yeah. Like,
and there's so much salesmanship there and personality involved in it. There's so many interesting segues right here. And I was struck kind of by a little bit of the irony of you talking about your main criticisms about chess. And that one, you have complete information and that you have to basically innovate within theoretical lines and all of the complete information, and that there isn't this sort of weird shifting probabilistic thing going on with hands that you can't see. And you also didn't like to do the gaming research part of it. And then when you talked about what you loved about Magic, you loved memorizing deck lists and also metagaming. And those are basically the Magic versions of both of those things, which is kind of amazing. But it says something about how the games are different. I am in full agreement with you, honestly, that for my whole life, I've had people say, hey, why don't you play chess? You'd be so good at chess. You're so strategic in your thinking. Certainly after I started playing Magic, many people say to me, why don't you play chess, Brian? And I suspect that the way that my brain kind of resonates with Magic versus chess is very similar to yours. For me, chess is like, honestly, it's totally solved for one.
Not only solved, but there is a correct answer. Like there's
a correct answer. Yeah, the chess engines are so much more powerful than human beings at this point. Yeah. They're orders of magnitude more powerful in the sense that the best chess player in the world would lose 100-0 to Stockfish or something.
Yeah,
doing it alone probably. So what does that say about the game, right? Like what skill set is it actually testing for? And yet there's no equivalent to Stockfish in Magic, and there probably never will be.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like a thing that you're getting at, which I think is really interesting, is like one of the other frustrating things about chess is that like the correct answer is something that you shouldn't even be trying to get to in many cases, because like the Stockfish move will not make sense to you unless you can calculate in the way that a computer can calculate, that like you would never find it. So you're not even like attempting to play correctly. It's like a funny thing about chess right now in certain scenarios. Like there are all these moves that like the best computer move is so strange that you would just never do it. A thing that is nice about Magic is like, just because there isn't a correct move, there are certainly incorrect moves in Magic. There are certainly incorrect things to do, right? And so, I think one of my other gripes with a lot of players of Magic is like, I am a big believer that you should be doing a fair amount of math while you play.
Yeah, what does that math look like to you? How does it show up when you're playing a game?
Well, it's like, okay, for example, let's say I am looking at a ponder, right? I have 3 cards and I can choose to shuffle and draw a card, right?
Yeah.
One of the cards is medium good, but there's a card in my deck that would be great, right? I look at my hand, my permanents, and my graveyard, and I count the cards. I say, okay, how many cards are left in my deck? And then what is the chance that my shuffle gets me to one of the how many copies of this card are left that gets me there, right? I even think about this with like keeping one-landers, right? This is a huge one of like, okay, what is the curve of my hand? How punishing is missing a land for each of the turns, right? Like in many cases, I actually think that you can keep, if you have a hand where you don't care if you miss the second land drop so long as you hit it on turn 3, and then you don't need to hit it on turn 4. This is like a very common hand in aggro decks. Like I actually think this is okay to keep, right? Where like it's actually not very punishing to miss the second land drop. This is, and if you do the math, right? Okay, let's say you have like a third of your deck is lands, right? And so like the chance, and let's say you're going first, the chance that you don't draw a land in the first draw is 60%, right? Or 66%, right? The chance that you don't draw a land in either of the first 2 draws like goes down substantially, right? Now it's like more likely than not.
Twice.
Yeah. 3 draws is basically crazy, right? So if you're on the draw and you have that land, you should just probably, and you have that hand that is of that archetype, like you should probably keep, right? And so, it's not like crazy complicated math to do, but like, I think that you are very benefited from thinking in that way as it pertains to like making decisions. And I also think this is where like I see a transition, because a lot of the players that I talk to who grew up playing Magic in the early days, right, like don't think about the game in that way. And I think this is like a big evolution of like, even, if you look at like the transition of poker, like poker players, like game theory optimal in the 90s was like thought about very differently than game theory optimal now, when you have like an overlay that shows you all the odds and everything. And like, and now the metagame of poker is like, well, how do I beat someone playing game theory optimal? Like, and how do I identify that that's what they're doing? And like these kind of things, right? And it's just, it's interesting in poker that there is a game theory optimal, but unlike chess, in poker, game theory optimal is not inherently the correct strategy, right? It's not right to always play game theory optimal in poker, whereas in chess, you should always, if you could always play like Stockfish, you would, right?
Yeah, well, and obviously the existence of wagers changes the decisions so much. In chess, there's no wager at all other than just sitting down and shaking your opponent's hand and beginning a game and wagering some of your ELO, right? But in poker, you have your decision is so incredibly consequential, because if you make a decision that's like a 40-60 in your favor, you might be forced to commit $20,000 on the river.
Yeah.
Not really necessarily knowing where you are. So it's funny when you're talking about that. I studied poker a lot back in early 2000s when there was this big transition going on between the pro Magic community and the poker community by nature of David Williams' score in 2004 when he finished second at the main event and won $3.5 million, and everyone lost their collective minds. And so there was this exodus from pro Magic into pro poker, and I picked up some books and started reading about it also, and read Mike Caro's books he wrote a book about tells, and he also wrote a book about odds and implied odds. He talked a lot about implied odds. And I think that's kind of a little bit what you're describing right here. It's this idea that there's this human element to it. And sometimes you can get people to forfeit the stronger position in poker. And you generally can't do that in chess because people, I imagine, who are good enough to beat you understand that they're in a dominant position and would never forfeit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's also like, a very funny thing about poker is like someone playing pseudo randomly who doesn't even know what game theory optimal is like ironically very hard to play against as someone playing like something like game theory optimal, right? Totally, yeah. And I think this is also an interesting thing of like one of my like I don't love the game of poker. I think it's okay, which is a very controversial thing.
You and I are in total alignment. I think consider this. I'm just to interject. How much poker have you played with no stakes?
None.
How much Magic have you played with no stakes?
Tons. Yeah.
All of it, basically, except for, the Cube event. That's the difference, right? That's a very important difference. Well, poker with no money is just like pointless and boring.
I think poker creates a lot of scenarios that are like, okay, so there's a lot of like high EV things that you can do, but that you end up on the bad side of variance. So like I give an extreme. It's like if you have a 10% chance to win $100,000, right? Like, there's you could buy that that's worth like $10,000, right? 10% chance for $100,000. But like, let's say you had the option to buy that for $5,000. Like you should do that every day of the week, right?
100% of the time.
9 times out of 10, you're going to get punted. You're just going to lose $5,000, right?
Yeah. And slink away from the table feeling like, oh my God, I feel gutted. I just lost $5,000 on one hand of poker. Yeah.
And so I think one of the funnier things about Magic that is actually a good function of Magic in its efficacy to retain people is that like, so one of the main arbitrages in the entire world that I think people need to pay attention to is the average person thinks they're above average, right? And Magic, by virtue of being a game where the best players are like 65 or 75% against the field, like means that players who are actually below average will beat the best players sometimes. And like there's a lot more and will win tournaments sometimes, right? And so like you have a lot more people who have won a tournament at some point that think for the rest of their lives that they're above average that may actually be below average, right? And this is a very great retention tool for Magic. And one of the other things about poker that I think the thing I find most interesting about poker is the subgame of poker, which the subgame of poker that you're actually playing is how do I get invited to the softest game with the highest stakes, right? Yeah, that is the actual game of poker. It's not play. Like if you want to go say, I'm the best poker player in Vegas, right? If you are playing in Vegas, you're doing it wrong because everyone in Vegas is really, really good, right? You should be in some back room somewhere with a bunch of like rich dudes who don't care about the money they're gambling with, and you're just going to eat their lunch and they're the fish, right? Like this is the game of poker. Whereas whereas in Magic, like you find a much softer field, like much more often because like a lot of people are just not that good at the game, even though they play all the time.
I want to use your discussion actually about, well, specifically variance and how in poker, the variance is one of the lifebloods of keeping people coming back to the tables. The fact that the best player in the world sitting, I'm sure you've had this experience if you've ever taught somebody to play poker.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, well, maybe not that often, but more than half the time when I teach someone to play poker, they kick my ass in heads up right away. I just lose.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, they just called with this random hand. Oh,
they just all in with 2-7 offsuit and we flopped like 3 sevens. All right.
Exactly.
That's the game.
Invariably it happens, right? It's such an integral part of that experience. It's actually the only reason why it's a viable way to make a living.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're just paying all the money to the rake or you're getting your ass kicked and demolished by people who are just better than you. So the variance is such an integral part of what makes the game good. This is also totally true for Magic. And it's a good segue to your core project right now.
Yeah.
You are, I guess, the CEO, co-founder of a company called Orange Cap Games. Yep. Tell me about how you came to create Orange Cap Games.
Yeah, so I prior to this was running a crypto fund, and we were invested in a company called Pudgy Penguins, which is a digitally native NFT IP. They were a large portfolio company of ours, and they were monetizing their IP sort of primarily through like plush toys, and they were distributed in Walmart, and which was great. But I was talking with the CEO and I was like, look, like plush toys are good, but they're not the highest margin thing in the whole world. And they're not the most collectible thing in the whole world. And like, there tends to be a lot of overlap between the crypto world and the magic world and collectibles worlds. And I think this makes a lot of sense because once you've gotten over in your head that a piece of cardboard could be worth $10,000, it's not as big a jump to be like, all right, something on the internet that is not even a piece of cardboard could also be worth this, right? And I think this is like a leap that one could make. It's and so like, it's kind of like how like, you know, I think strip clubs often recruit girls from Hooters because it's like if you've gone and been a Hooters girl, like you're more likely to want to then be that. And this is a similar like thing of how do you get into crypto? And so there's a lot of overlap between like game players and crypto, right? And so
there is indeed. We're making a documentary about it, but we'll get to that later. Continue.
So we went and we were like, okay, like you should do a trading card game. And the CEO Luca was like, all right, I don't know I have no idea how to do this. Like, can you help me do this? And so I went and we talked to some of the companies that, you know, you might think about talking to that do these kind of things. And you're getting quotes in the ballpark of like $10 million in 3 years to design the game. And then we were talking to the printing companies that print the game. And they're like, yeah, like maybe we'll have printing time in 5 years and your minimum order quantity is this. And like, maybe we can find blue core paper and like, and this. I was like, this is like a weirdly hard thing, right? And at the same time, we're watching One Piece absolutely explode, like One Piece TCG, right? And One Piece becoming the main monetization method for the One Piece IP, right? The TCG.
Yeah, what is One Piece? I actually have not heard of it.
Okay, One Piece is a very large manga anime IP property from Japan. One Piece TCG is like, I would say it's probably like Pokemon, Magic, One Piece in that order. In terms, like it's definitely larger than Yu-Gi-Oh right now. It's huge. It's huge.
How have
huge.
I not heard of it? That's crazy.
That is crazy. They're doing well over $1 billion in sales a year of the One Piece TCG. Like it's absolutely the biggest TCG product coming in a very long time. You also see Magic starting to have incredible success with Universes Beyond, right? This is like two-ish years ago. And I was like, wow, this is a really interesting experience. I'm talking this IP that, you know, is this growing IP. Pudgy Penguins, by the way, has, you know, I think it's 100 billion impressions on Giphy now. It's like one of the largest GIF brands.
Crazy.
So this is like not a small IP, right? The pathway to getting onto a TCG product is like insane, right? And so, you know, whenever I see that as an investor, I'm looking around saying, well, no one is doing this, so maybe there's a business opportunity to do it, right? And so we said, hey, like actually, we'll just do it for you, and we'll form this company. And so we made Orange Cap Games with the mission to bring IP to life, right?
What was the inspiration behind the name?
Orange Cap Games.
Yeah.
So I had kind of gotten into crypto like early in 21, like kind of full time through NFTs. It was the thing that made sense to me. And the first NFTs that I purchased all had orange beanies that they were wearing. And it was sort of a little bit of an homage for myself to where we came from. And I also really liked the acronym OCG. I thought it kind of rolled off the tongue well. And so we went with Orange Cap Games as that little nod there.
So the game that you built at Orange Cap Games, this fusion using the Pudgy Penguins IP, is called Vibes.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me, what was the idea behind just the theme of the game? Why is it called Vibes?
Well, one of the things, there's a couple of trends that I had identified that I thought were being underserved in TCG. One of which is like basically every TCG is based on violence. Like Magic, you kill things and they go to the graveyard. Even like Pokemon, like you are fighting like animals against each other, and they're like on the bench, and then they have to recover. And I think in Pokemon it's called KOing, right? Like you KO, you knock out an animal is like how
knockout Pokemon, for sure, definitely,
and like even, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh, like it's all like combat based fighting, like, you know. And one of the trends that I think I saw that was really interesting to me was Genshin Impact being this huge, like there's this like large thing that was like girls don't play MMORPGs, right? And then turns out you made an MMORPG that was skinned and voiced in the way that girls like, and turns out girls do play MMORPGs, right? And so
naturally,
you see this huge increase of like both female and queer, and also like everyone else, like playing of games is like a huge category of genre. I think even you can see this in Magic, where like the queer subcommunity of Magic is getting larger, and especially like the female subcommunity of just game players in general, like it is one of the largest shifts over the last couple of years. Is like there's just a lot more girls playing games, which makes sense, right?
I was just thinking about our experience recently at the GP Vegas, or Magic Fest Vegas, or whatever it's called now. You walk around, it's crazy, right? 25, 30% of the people are female now.
Which is great, which is not what it used to be.
No, when you started, I imagine it was women were like unicorns, and when I started, there were like 2 or 3 who played Magic in any kind of prominent way on the whole planet.
Yeah, and so I was like, okay, well, and also like younger kids too, like, and there's a lot of regions and people that don't like one of the challenges for Magic, especially in the Southern United States, is that like it's a little demonic, like, and like, you know, Demonic Tutor is a card, like Wrath of God is a card, like. There is a lot of people that don't want their kids exposed to that. So we said, hey, let's make a family-friendly TCG that is, you know, about, you know, passing the vibe check and vibing more than other penguins. You don't kill them. They go to the ice. You ice them. You know, that's where we spent a long time deciding what the non-graveyard graveyard would be. You know, there aren't violent things going on in the game. There isn't even combat, which was an interesting decision to remove that, which was not, by the way, the decision to remove combat was not for thematic purposes. It was for other purposes, but a splash effect of that was that like it furthered this goal of being like cute and family friendly and like, you know, kind of approachable. There, we also, you know, we called it Vibes and not just like Pudgy Penguins, a trading card game, because again, I'm very long this like thesis of IP monetization through trading cards. So we've actually included other IPs as well in the game. Inclusive of we officially licensed Nyan Cat IP, so we have the official Nyan Cat trading card as a Vibes card. If you've ever seen that meme,
I'm familiar with it for sure.
And then we have we also have the upcoming release, which I think will be out by the time this airs, which is it brings in an IP that we actually own called Burb as well. But you know, we've sort of left the door open to a lot of those kind of things.
It was interesting looking through the rule book of Vibes. You were very kind enough to send me a colossal amount of starter product, more than I'm likely to ever use, considering that each one, I guess, is 2 different starter decks, which is also a really kind of neat way to present a product. 52 card starter decks that you're meant to just shuffle up and play against a friend.
Yes. When we designed the starter decks, there's 2 concepts, which is that I really, really don't like incomplete game products. And so like the single starter deck Magic product, and like every game makes this like single starter deck product, right? And like
they did,
and like this is not to me a success. Like this is not a game. This is half of a game. And so like if you are learning to play a game, like you should be able to acquire a game. And I can't tell you how many times that I've like wanted to play, like my co-designer and I during the pandemic, we just decided we want to play Yu-Gi-Oh one day. And we went to the local GameStop and they only had 1 starter deck. They had multiple copies of the same starter deck, but so we ended up with the same deck. And I was like, this is silly, because they probably at one point had 2 starter decks and one of them sold more than the other. Now they're left with 1 starter deck. And so really there should just be this complete game product. And the product, by the way, should very deeply contemplate how those 2 decks interact, right? Like I think when you are designing a game product, the first play experience is incredibly important. And so in our design process, like one of the things that we talk about internally as a small game company is like where are we spending our complexity chips? Where are we investing our like, you know, R&D hours, right? We're not able to test every configuration of every deck possible, but we spent a lot, we way overweighted the design of especially the beginner starter decks. And we came up with 2 products, the beginner starter decks, which were like,
how many are there? How many are there in total?
There's 2 starter deck products. Currently, this new release has 2 new ones. So there's the beginner starter decks, which is green versus yellow. And this is like, if you've never played a TCG before, this should introduce you to the TCG as a genre, right? One of our main goals was we wanted to design a TCG that you could finish playing the game you learned in. That was like the goal. If someone was teaching you. And
can you explain what you mean by that a little bit more?
Exactly.
You finished playing in the game you learned in.
So meaning if I'm teaching you how to play a TCG, usually this is how it works. I think I'm going to sit down, I'm going to explain to you the rules, right? You're going to kind of get some of it, but then I'm going to say, let's shuffle up and let's kind of play together. Right. And like the question is, and for the first couple of turns, I'm gonna have to kind of like, I'm usually maybe show me your hand or like all these kind of things, right? If I'm teaching someone who's never played a game before, and I'll show you how to do these game actions, but like, at what point can we just play, right? And you will generally playing the game correctly. For Magic, my experience is that this is about 45 minutes that it takes to get to someone where you could really not have to, so actually that doesn't work that way. But this Planeswalker you plus, like, I'm sorry, I'm gifting a fish and like, here's a treasure token.
Don't mention Planeswalkers in introductory Magic.
Yeah, but you encounter a lot of things that are like, It's just not, and it's just because there's a lot going on in Magic and all sorts of reasons. But like the goal was, okay, by say turn 7, can you just be playing on your own? And when we made the online game, like the tutorial takes you through, I think the first like 3 to 5 turns, and then you just finish playing the game against an AI, right? And so like you need to know how the game works by that point. And so that was a very, very big goal of ours. And also like you need to understand what types of decisions matter or not. So those are the beginner starter decks. The advanced starter decks are, if you're a Magic player, are Lantern Control versus Storm. And this was intended to say, if you're a Magic player and you want to try the game and see how deep it is, get the advanced starter decks, because this is like a lot. There's a lot more use of the stack, like these kind of things, and like there's a lot more nuanced decisions that you're going to have to make. And in almost like a funny way, like the advanced starter decks are more like complicated to play and maybe don't exist in the competitive meta in that way, but they're like tuned in a way. They're like intentionally complex, right? They're meant to give you as many weird decision points as possible. Whereas the beginner starter decks are like, there's a very linear thing you're doing. There is probably a correct answer or a wrong answer, and you're meant to like figure that out very quickly and like feel like you're making good decisions, and it's like a good feeling, right?
Yeah, my impression of the game right away, just sort of reading through the rule book, was that it felt deeply Magic inspired.
Yes.
All the familiar tropes of Magic were contained in this game. And it was interesting to see which things you guys preserved from the core Magic design and where the consolidations happen. So, for example, you have multiple colors, and the colors give you the ability. It's very, very good, I'm sure, as a designer, for top-down design, because you have a theme for yellow, you have a theme for red, you have a theme for green. And so creating the tools that green and red and yellow use is intuitive. You understand kind of the ethos of the color in the very same way that the color pie in Magic works.
Yeah. Well, I think that the thing for me was like, I think that if you look at TCGs, there's this, like, it's basically an entire genre of redesigned Magic, right? Like that is generally what I think of most of the best TCGs are, right? There's a few that are outliers. Like I don't think that you start making a TCG being like, I want to redesign Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Yu-Gi-Oh not having a resource system means that everything just happens on the first turn in every game. And I don't think this is like a general design principle you want to go. I don't think you start from like, I want to redesign. Actually, so I've heard Pokemon is very good now, but like for a very long time, Pokemon was like almost not playable, right? And so like, but there's like a huge breadth of games that are just like, how do you redesign Magic and what are the interesting choices to make? And one of the biggest things for us in the redesign Magic genre was like, okay, couple of things that are huge maximization principles. One, and when we did design, we really started from like a principles-based approach. Like what are the goals and then how do we achieve them, right? One of the goals is play as little of the game as possible where you are greatly behind and can't possibly win. Because the worst time that I've had playing Magic is when I'm sitting there, I'm like, I guess I could technically win this game, but like I'm so far, I guess I still have to play. And like sometimes that's many, many turns, right? And as a lands player who likes to wasteland and play my life from the loams, like I've played many a game of Magic where one of the players has not really had a chance to win for many of the turns, right? And so this is not like this is a fun experience for me, but generally probably not a great game design principle. And so one of the core mechanics that we have is when we got rid of combat, it's just the single penguin with the highest vibe wins the vibe check on either side, right? And when you win the vibe check, you get the top card of your deck into play essentially as a land. When you lose it, you draw a card. Sorry, Now,
that's right. Yeah.
What this does is if you are ahead on board, you become behind in hand because you're winning the vibe checks, you're ahead on board, but you're getting fewer hand resources because your resources are going in directly to play as a land, right? When you are behind on board, you get more resources in hand. And so this is a balancing mechanic naturally in the game for like, when you feel like your back is against the wall, you should be getting more resources to get your back out from behind the wall. So it shouldn't feel so steamrolly. Another thing that we wanted to do was normalize the length of games, right? A Magic game can be 5 minutes. It can also be
an hour. Yeah.
Many hours, right? Who knows how long Commander's games last? I don't know.
Oh, if you're talking about, Commander interminable, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But and this is like tough for competitive play. So in our game, like the win condition is if you've won the prior vibe check, which means you have the Baron, and then you start your turn, you have 15 permanents in play, you win the game, right? And so like you cannot possibly win the game on the first turn because you don't have 15 cards. And we're very, very conservative about printing card advantage things because it impacts this variable. And so like one of the things that really like we have a lot of data on this, that like there is a very normalized turn in which the game ends because it's the turn where both players have 15 card resources, and either one could win and one of you has to pull something out. Now, there is removal and stuff, so it's not exactly on the same turn every time, but like there is a much more so than Magic normalized version. And also like, because of that, the game, like one of the other things is like, the game should be very jammy, right? Like there's one of the other splash benefits of removing combat was like that you skip this whole thinking that you have to do. And like, I like combat. I don't love combat. And there's just like for the same reason I don't love chess, which is that it is like a known information game. And like, yeah, maybe they have a trick in their hand, but like, like whenever I watch someone in Magic do combat math wrong, it's like, oh man, like that just sucks, right? And it's not like the easiest thing to do. Like sometimes you do just make mistakes of blocking wrong or like this, that, the other. But like, it's just like all this thinking you have to do to get to a correct answer that everybody knows. And like, you feel foolish when you don't arrive at the correct answer, right? And like, this is a very interesting thing, which I don't actually, my personal opinion is I don't actually think is that great for the game. Now it does open a lot of design space up, which is a nice component of it. We do often bemoan the lack of combat just because there's so many effects that you could have that would deal with it. But one of, I think, the most interesting choices that we made in designing the game is how we approached the stack. So one of the, I think, Magic's largest challenges today is how difficult it is to translate into an online game. My play experience for Magic is a little bit counter to what I said earlier, but this is just my reality, is like, I play a lot online and I really enjoy playing in person, but I don't get to do it that much. I get to do it once in a while, right? But I maintain a very large collection of physical cards, kind of just in case. I don't know. Like, I don't think I would maintain it unless I was playing a bunch online. And I think a lot of people are like that. And so, but the big issue with Magic is Magic was a game that was conceptualized where there wasn't like a digital game in the concept, right? And so one of the best things about Magic, that I think this is what everyone messes up when they redesign Magic, is everyone basically cuts the stack, right? Everyone, like when you look at like Hearthstone, you look at One Piece, it's like, I take a turn, you take a turn, I take a turn, you take a turn, right?
Right.
And they do this, one of the reasons that some games, like most of the digital TCGs do this, is because like chess clocking back and forth with, no, I don't want to make a decision. Like every time that you could make a decision, you have to say, I don't want to make a decision. And you maybe shouldn't just auto skip it, because then it tells the other person that they couldn't have made the decision. But like,
this is the arena versus Magic Online. Exactly. It's the auto yielding thing, which takes away a lot of the suspense, right?
And the bluffing
and the bluffing. Exactly.
Yeah.
If the person, to just be more explicit about that, if you and I are contesting a game of Old School and I play a bait spell of some kind, a disenchant on your Mishra's Factory, and there's no yield on your side, I'm like, cool, mind twist you for 5.
Exactly, right? But if I stop and tank, like, it's different, right?
Exactly.
And this is a great part of Magic, but it's also why it doesn't translate quite as well as some other games into online games. But like, I think everyone's just like, I played a lot of Hearthstone, and like my gripe with Hearthstone and why I stopped playing Hearthstone was like, it's just, at a certain level of Hearthstone, it became too RNG based. And I think one of the reasons that it became
a ridiculous game now. And
why was that though, is because like so much of the skillful decisions in Magic happen on the stack. And so like what we did, but like, I think you don't want to cut the stack entirely, but you just can't have the stack as often as you have it in Magic. What we did in our game was we said, my turn, your turn, the stack turn. Right. And the order of our turns is actually determined by who won the last vibe check. That way, it's not always the same person going first. This was really important because I believe games with the stack are just fundamentally better and more interesting games, because that's where the most interesting things happen. Like the most exciting moments to me in Magic happen on the stack. Right. And it's the thing that I miss the most when I play other games in the genre of redesigned Magic. Right. And so the goal was like make it jammier, easier to learn, faster. One of the other things, like we don't really have keywords. We like have a couple. We were very allergic to keywords. We wanted you to be able to pick up a card and read the card, and the card did the thing the card said, right? And like, this should be intuitive. And so, this is a lot of like the premises that we took of the like redesigned Magic genre. But one of the fun things about when you add all of these changes together, most Magic players intuit decisions and vibes exactly wrong. And this is very fun and interesting to watch Magic players pick up our game, because you would expect that like, oh, me playing Magic would give me this huge advantage. But like, there's like one of the core things about Magic is like, it really matters to be ahead on board all the time. And in vibes, because there's no combat and only your single, most power, like highest vibe penguin matters for the like a combat equivalent, which is the vibe check. Like it actually like is not so punishing to be behind on board early. And if you just dump your hand, like this is actually kind of bad sometimes. And so, that's one of the most interesting like learning curves of Magic is it is surprising how many things that how the summative nature of all this gives Magic players this very interesting intuition to unlearn. And I think a lot of our player base that has come over from Magic has really enjoyed that part of it, right?
Yeah, it's so interesting. When you talk about that, it's almost like the Timmy persona would have a predisposition to do well in vibes versus a very spiky Magic player, because all of the instincts are reversed. That it's much more about having just a big, powerful Voltron-y penguin that dominates the board, even if that doesn't mean that you have a board at all. And your opponent can go wide and they don't match your guy because you went all in on one guy. And I haven't played enough of the game to know whether or not, can you kill your opponent's penguins? You can. You can remove them, but you can't fight them.
You can remove them and put them in the ice, which is, there is no graveyard. You can't kill them. As I said, there's no violence, but for those of you who are Magic brained, yes, you can remove your opponent's permanents from play. You can also, there are pump spells and things aside your actions, as we call it in the game, that there are many very interesting interactions. As a matter of fact, one of the best, so purple, which is not a deck that has a starter deck, one of the strongest decks, the deck that actually won our world championships, is essentially the equivalent of Hogak Vengevine deck. It's like a dredge deck essentially, which is a very complicated and nuanced, so complicated in fact that if I were to hand you the stock list that won the world championships, you, without any explanation, the first time you played it, you would almost certainly not be able to figure out how it won.
I bet you that's true. Yeah, certainly based on how the games are so different.
Yeah,
there's a few other things that are really interesting to me. Yeah, that are mechanical divergences between the two games. There's one in particular that I'm definitely going to get to, but just for the sake of the audience, you mentioned the lack of keywords. There are a few keywords. You guys came up with the idea of flopping a card versus tapping it.
Yeah.
What was on the short list of kind of different ideas to replace the word tap, or was flop something you guys hit on right away?
Sometimes you just come up with something and it's just so good that you're like, oh wait, this is just obviously correct, right? And we wanted the game to feel more whimsical, to be a little bit cheeky. All of the art in our game there's a lot of meme references. There's a lot of a
little reference right here in my camera.
Fine art references. There's a lot of
right there.
A lot of TV and movie references. There's a lot of references. It's all sort of tongue in cheek, funny. We were like, okay, if you want a game that's cute and funny, and we're playing with, Pudgy Penguins, you got to go all in. You can't kind of do that concept, but it's not really there. And so flop just makes sense, I think, in that context, right?
And your sort of all-inclusive spells are just called actions.
Yes. Well, so actions was this other thing. There's this anime called Spy Family, and there's an instructor at the school, and he goes elegant. And so we have this giant poster in office of him going elegant. And we very much believe in sometimes you just reach these very elegant answers to things. And so
I completely agree. This is something that I deal with every day in the game I'm working on, where we actually have managed to consolidate 10 different card types down to just 6, which is very handy because there are 6 colors in Magic, just conveniently. So it gave us a sort of sense of how to make the frames look and stuff too. Also, at least specifically color coding all the frames.
Yeah.
Ice, as you mentioned, is the discard pile.
Yeah.
And penguins are creatures, right? They're basically essentially the same idea, although they don't fight. So their stats matter in a different way.
Yeah.
But the one thing that's really, really interesting to me, and this is something that my fellow game designer, Matt Place, and I have discussed a lot. You met Matt briefly when we were in Vegas together. And as soon as you guys were chatting, I thought, man, I bet that these two guys could spend all afternoon chatting about endless things. You seem to vibe so well together. But if you talked about this one particular subject, the way that the mana system works in vibes, you would have met a fierce adversary. Because Matt is firmly of the belief that the idea of the cards having an opposite side, that is the resource, this is the rod side, and rods are universally, it's basically like the crystals in Hearthstone, a generic mana that casts everything. What's interesting too is that I guess the cards have a symbol in the corner, which is actually the closest thing to real mana in Magic, and you use it specifically to play the action cards in the game. So you cast your spells off your creatures, which is a really cool and interesting intuition. But the cards themselves can all be played as a resource, that you can take your 10-drop penguin or whatever and put him into play as a land permanently. Matt would say that that is a fatal flaw, that it has afflicted many, many other games that have tried to deal with this fundamental RNG thing that goes on in Magic. And Matt's argument would have been that the thing that gives players hope, that prevents the sort of chess situation where the 2,000 rated player wins 10,000 games in a row off the 1,200 rated player, doesn't exist in Magic because of the fact you can't do that.
Because of Mana Screw, you're saying?
Because of Mana Screw and Mana Flood, and that you guys decided to go with this other route. So, do you think that compromise, does that compromise Vibes' vibe, or does it mean that you get more games, as you said, that are more deterministic and also more interactive?
So I'm actually going to push back on something which is a conclusion that you've jumped to, but there's a few things to work through here. So I want to explain the decision of like why we designed it that way. So I really like the ability to put cards face down, not because it fixes Mana Flood and Mana Screw, but because it is a very, very interesting decision point, and you have to make it all the time. One of the other things is there's also many cards in Vibes that let you pick up the cards that are face down. And I also think that's a very interesting decision.
I did not know that.
I also think that it greatly decreases the amount of time that, so like in our game, the way the mulligans work, it's a single partial Paris mulligan. So you take your hand, and you can take any number of cards, put them on the bottom, draw them many cards exactly one time.
Yeah, it's very generous, Hearthstone style.
Importantly, there's no shuffling, right? I am very allergic to things that do shuffling because I have cracked way too many fetch lands and my wrists are messed up from that. And so we don't do a lot of shuffling. And so the biggest downside, I actually think, to having the cards be played face down. So first of all, okay, there's a decision that like Lorcana does where like only some cards can be played for face down. You have to show them to people. We decided not to go that route because I really don't like that decision, because I don't like known information in games that you have to remember, right? So like Catan is a game that I really don't like because you could know every resource in everyone's hand if you paid attention, but like that is a really tough thing to keep in your head. There's a gripe that I have with Flesh and Blood because like you could know everyone's decks in order, both players, but like the number of people that can hold the order of 120 cards in their head is like 20, and they are the 20 best Hearthstone players, right? Like this, I don't think is a
Flesh and Blood.
Flesh and Blood. Yes. So I didn't want to show it to them. I want everything to be played face down. But one of the biggest weird things that happens in this concept is like now you don't have colored mana because every card back has to be the same, obviously, right? And so how, say, Lorcana solves this is like, okay, you can only play 2 colors in a deck, right? And that's like just a rule, right? Kind of like Commander. But I don't like this. And I don't like this because if when I was in middle school and I had Magic cards, I want to be able to play with all of my cards. Not that I should play with all of them, but I want to feel like I could play with all of them, right? And like that I open up booster pack and it's more likely to be exciting, and I want to reconfigure my deck. And one of the things that I think Vive is really good about is you could play any penguin. Like people play off-color single penguins in their competitive decks all the time, right? They effectively don't make Pudge, which is the resource to play the actions.
Right.
But it's like, I want you could play anything, but should you, right? Like you could do anything. It's a card you own, you can play with it, but like, should you do anything? And so an important thing is like the actions we need to design to be good enough that you wanted to play them, right? And so because you want to play actions, this is a reason to constrain your card pool decisions to certain colors, right? In order to play certain actions. We also have a bunch of cards that like are benefited. So for example, there's one of the strongest cards in the game is called Peace Out Penguin, which is lets you like remove 2 of your opponent's penguins, but only if you've played a red action that turn, right? And so this is a reason to play red actions. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of competitive decks that play red actions and ways to play red actions just to get Peace Out Penguin to work, right?
Interesting.
And so
it reminds me a little bit, just to make a Magic analogy, that you play like a white weenie deck, like a rebel white weenie deck, and run Gaia's Cradle in there. You're not playing any green cards, but you want that giant generic mana engine to run all your rebels so that you can use your rebels like crazy, or running Caracas in a mono green deck or something because you're playing in some weird all legends meta or something like that. It sort of sounds familiar to me to ground it in a Magic analogy.
And but I think the most interesting thing is that there still is Mana Screw because you can get penguin screwed. Because the thing is, if you draw a hand and it's 5 actions, you can't play any of the actions.
Right, you need your few
because your lands don't play actions.
Yeah, you need
so
Pudge.
like we actually did not entirely remove Mana Screw as a concept intentionally. Like if you don't have enough, if you are overweight, if you just keep drawing actions and someone has removed all of your penguins, like you're not in good shape.
No, it makes perfect sense. That's actually, I didn't consider that.
And this is a solve that works because we have this chain of like lands play creatures, creatures play spells, right? And not lands play spells and creatures. Because of that, like we have given you a good reason to play both in your deck, although you don't have to. There are some decks that don't play any actions. And then we've given you this other sort of like incentive mechanism to do things, right? And this is sort of like a big philosophy of mine is like outcomes in the game ideally are achieved through you should want to do this, not I'm telling you to do this. Like you should want to not play 5 colors because you want to play actions. I'm not going to tell you don't play 5 colors.
Right. Yeah, it seems much, much more possible to do that, certainly, versus in Magic, where you learn very quickly that unless you're playing with a full suite of dual lands and command or something, that 5 color is next to impossible. At least with modern design. I mean, if you look at an old school deck, for example, an old school deck is the control decks are 5 colors, but they're using 1 green card, 1 red card, 2 black cards. You know, it's like they're basically just 2 color decks still.
Yeah.
You know you're having a good time when an hour flies by. I cannot believe we've already talked for an hour, Spencer. We're going to leave it there and come back next week for part 2. I cannot wait for that conversation. So thank you for joining me so far.
Thanks so much for having me, and excited for part 2.
Awesome. I would love your feedback on this series. If you're enjoying the videos, please give me a thumbs up. If there's games you think I might have missed, let me know and I will get to them. See you for the next one.